Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pinball Storytellers, our weekly storytelling show. And this is Justin over here, my co-host for the show, which is actually not late. He showed up 1 minute before the time. Okay, so hello, Justin. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good, Chucky. How about you?
Pretty good.
How's Romania?
Romania is okay. Nothing new. Everything the same. Well, there's actually very little change in Romania, so it would be weird to have something new.
Interesting.
So, how is San Francisco? I heard there's a big storm going on there.
There's a huge storm. It's been raining for like 24 hours straight.
Wow.
It's yeah. There might actually be rain days at schools because the power might go out and then they can't teach in the dark. So
So that's an actual thing that doesn't really happen. Rain days.
that's an actual thing that could happen. Like normally storms aren't so bad, but in this case the storm is bad enough that the kids might actually like have to be sent home.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
It
I
is.
don't I don't I don't think we've gotten a storm this like intense in 30 or 40 years or something. And we need the rain. California's in the middle of like a huge drought.
We usually have this throughout like like rain like this usually happens every spring. There's like huge even cities, not to talk about hundreds and hundreds of villages that are just completely flooded each year.
Yeah, that happens in the Philippines too during hurricane season. So I don't know. Americans are just spoiled by not having real storms, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you want to talk about a bit about what happened last time? Why we are going to do the format we're going to do today?
So we put it up on a poll last time in Storytellers Talk to Chat, Storytellers Talk to Twitch Chat, and we put up all the formats that we've thought about doing. And the one that got picked was chaotic storytelling. And chaotic storytelling is a tough one. Basically, you don't start out with an actual story that you're familiar with, which is what we've done every episode so far. We started out with a fairy tale or a short story from a book or something. In chaotic storytelling, what we're going to do is we're going to find a way where we think of a premise for a story, and then we're just going to go with it and see like where it leads. We have no idea where it's going to lead. And the tricky thing is going to be establishing rules for, chaotic storytelling has rules. It's true. For how things get decided, I think. Because you can just be like completely off the rails. You can be like anything can happen. Like Cthulhu shows up, it's fine. I think Cthulhu showing up is actually always allowed in any kind of storytelling because he's Cthulhu.
Definitely.
And you don't order around an old god. He can show up wherever he wants. But do you want to do that, or do you want to do something where you're really going completely off the rails? And I think for you can always make it binary, right? You can always do like a roll a 1d2. Speaking of which, I'm not in Roll20. It's probably important.
I sent you in Skype the Roll20 link.
I have it like bookmarked. I'm just not in it.
Nice. Oh, I'm actually in the wrong one. Join the one that I sent. I think this is the normal one or the dev one. Doesn't matter.
Why am I not in the pinball? Why? Okay, I'm in Pinball Storytellers. Do I have to join the other one?
No, you're in the right one. Just the background for the main image turned white for some reason. That's why I thought I was in the wrong one.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you can always make it binary. You can always decide either this is going to happen or this is going to happen for every given action, and then you can just roll. There's lots of different ways that you can arbitrate chaotic storytelling to a degree.
So basically what we thought about is take a couple of rules of something that is in a way pre-established and adapt them to what we have. So because this is actually one of the, well, in my opinion, the best idea we could come up with until now about this format. We're still unexperimented with it, so as we play it, and maybe next time when we do it again, we'll have more experience with this and we can do it better. But for the moment, what we decided is use these prompts, which are cards with text on them. Actually, see if I need to mirror my... I think I need to mirror my Can you actually read that?
He was freed from his enchantment, and the next day they were married.
Good. So, these are the endings. The idea is that each of us is a storyteller, and we each get this prompt card. Neither knows what the other one is. So basically, I'm gonna be like this. I show him the prompt card without looking, and he writes it down somewhere. And then I have one as well. We need to get to the same and to the ending that we have using the system of the cards that I have right here. There are a couple of cards each of us will get. We need to use these cards in the story we tell. So pointers, like main things need to be around these. Like for example, magic horse. For Romanian fairy tale last time, if you guys watched it, you know magic horse. Or a key, for example, a key that is very important to the storyline. Again, everything.
Philandering horse.
Philandering horse. And woman cheating horse. The idea is you need to use all your cards, and after you use all your cards, you can finish your story. The other storyteller, can interrupt you. What that means is that using a card I have in hand, if he has mentioned it, and he has no card for it, like he says something about a castle. A castle is important to the story, but he doesn't have a castle card. I have a castle card. I put down the castle card and I say, "And in this castle." So I basically continue on his story from there on and try and nudge it into my direction. The system we use in this system is called Once Upon a Time, which is very fitting. Very fitting to the setting. Okay, so I think that's about it. Do you have any other questions? Because Justin, you might have some questions.
No, let's just start playing.
Okay.
If I have questions, I will ask them.
So, let's start. I will shuffle these. And I would
Shuffling on stream to make sure that we're not cheating and we're actually doing chaotic storytelling.
Exactly. Taking a card, and I'm gonna tell me if I need to flip it. I'm not gonna watch.
Okay.
Do you see this? Can you read this?
Uh-huh.
Okay, write that down.
I got it.
Good. So I'm gonna put this. Where do I put this? So I don't know. I'm gonna put this in the back. I'm gonna throw it in the back.
Okay.
I threw it.
As long as you don't lose your cards.
No, it's my bed is behind me. It's okay. Good. And I'm gonna show. Bro, one sec. I'm gonna show chat mine. You cover your eyes.
Okay. Tell me when I can look.
Okay. You guys should be able to see this. Okay, that's enough for you. Hope you guys had time to read it. And that's about it for the endings. Now, the cards. This is gonna be fun. An additional rule that we're not gonna use. So if somebody is actually knows about the system, the rule that we're not gonna use is the rule of interrupt cards, because it's just annoying when somebody doesn't have the actual set of cards. So we're just gonna use the minimal rules of interrupting with the cards you have in hand. And just to give a pointer, you can actually have like something that's very close to the team, not exactly like if he mentions a mount, you can put down horse. If he mentions a secret city, you can put down ruins. It doesn't need to be the same word. It just needs to relate very good to the theme of the card. Okay, so the idea is each of us will get 9 cards. I will draw 9 cards. Shuffle them. Okay, and draw 9 cards and show them to you.
Okay. It should be fun.
You see this?
Yep. Got it.
Okay. I put it. I was checking.
Ooh, I always wanted one of those. Okay.
Good.
Okay.
There is 4.
Okay. There's a theme to mine. Got it.
Good, and that's gonna be 3 more.
Okay.
1
Okay. Got it.
and 3.
That's upside down. So
Got
9.
it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 8.
8, and last one.
Awesome. Okay.
Good. So these are your cards. I'm gonna take these and throw them in my bed. Good. Now I'm gonna draw 9 cards, and I'm gonna show them fast to chat. And we are going to jump into this. So I'm shuffling the cards.
Mm-hmm.
And now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Close your eyes. Close your eyes.
Yeah, I know, Trigger. I'm pretty happy with my cards.
I'm actually showing you the cards before I know what they are. So you guys have the advantage here. Okay. Just a couple more. And we can jump right into it. And the funny thing about the game, you know what the rules for who goes first is?
It's the rule for who goes first.
Who's the youngest?
Oh.
Or the funnier rule that we're gonna use is me drawing a random card from here, and who looks the most like that card.
Let's do that.
So, random card. We have a giant. Okay, how tall are you?
Just a little bit shy of 6'2".
So you need to give me that in meters.
Really?
Yes, I am not aware. I cannot make the difference.
Let's see. I can't. 1.87 meters.
Okay, so you're taller than me. So you start first. You are the giant. Just give me like 2 minutes to actually read my cards because I did not manage to. And I think the best music for this would be a tavern music. Get some tavern music running.
It's a good point, Ration.
Oh yeah.
I'm inherently taller because I'm standing.
Okay, so you can feel free to start.
Alright.
You need to start, by the way, with a phrase.
With a phrase? Okay.
With a phrase, once upon a time.
So I have a card, and if you bring up the idea of the card, I steal the story. But until then, I'm just telling my story until
I have an opening to use my card against you.
Correct.
And whenever you get interrupted, you draw 1 or 2 cards, whichever you want, because having more cards is making you further away from the goal, but having less cards is giving you less chances to interrupt somebody.
Alright. So once upon a time, there was a village at the foot of a volcano. And the village was so beautiful, and the surrounding rock formations from previous volcanic eruptions were so pretty that the royalty of the country had a summer palace there. And they would come there every summer with their children. They were very oh god, what's the word?
Fond.
They were a very bountiful royal family, and not like one of those pissy royal families you usually have in fairy tales that barely have 1 or 2 kids. No, they had like 6 or 7 kids, and she just kept popping them out year after year. Like
So you'd say both of them like husband and wife.
Yes, I would definitely say they were in husband.
Husband and wife. So these two, this husband and wife, they had a very nice relationship together. They actually wanted to feel like how their subjects would actually live. So from time to time, they would take their children, dress as commoners, and go to their cottage in the woods this cottage was quite important for them. They spent a lot of time there. Their children grew up there. Their children knew a lot of the farm boys over on there, and some girls. Actually, one of the biggest children had a crush on a farmhand. She
Ooh, and I'm gonna interrupt you with child.
child. Awesome, go.
He was a big farmhand.
Oh yes. By the way, do you want an extra card or 2 extra cards? Because you got.
Do I get to pick?
Yes.
Can I not take any?
You can choose to not take any. Yes.
I'll not take any.
Go
It
on.
seems reasonable. His friends called him Little Paul because he had such a big body but a tiny little head, sort of a gentle giant. And the prince and princesses couldn't get enough of, Tiny Paul, the way his muscles rippled in the sunlight, and the sheer amount of physical things he could do.
So Tiny Paul was this is not me interrupting, but this is me clarifying. Tiny Paul was the child that this child from the royal family had a crush on.
Yes.
Was she a girl or a boy? Just to...
I'm not biased like that. They can have a crush on
choose.
any gender they want.
No, I know it. Just true though. I want to know what the crush in your story is.
I choose to think that the girls had like a romantic crush on him, and the boys had a like I want to be big and strong like that one day kind of crush on him.
That sounds good.
So they all kind of looked up to him. Tiny Paul was older than all of them, and he had a little tiny head, super tiny head. And one day it came about the children were listening to the king and queen talk to Tiny Paul's parents, and it turns out that Tiny Paul's head was not natural. It was actually a curse given him by a witch.
A witch of the wilds. A witch that lived in the forest, and from year to year, rarely, when the blood moon would show itself on the sky, she would come to take her sacrifice, her protection tribute, as she called it. She never failed to show up, and farmers usually didn't resist. But that year, what was the name of your Widow Bob? Widow Tom?
Tiny Paul. Tiny Paul.
Tiny Paul was, well, afraid that the witch would take his sister. So he took up a pitchfork and waited for the witch. On that night, the witch came. She was not expecting resistance. She never had. Why would the farmers resist her powerful necromancy? And that's the opening the Tiny Paul needed. He pierced the witch's chest with a pitchfork, but that doesn't kill a witch. A witch doesn't die that easily. So she ran away into the forest back to her devilish cottage, and on her way, using blood magic, she cursed Tiny Paul and told him that now his cunning would become an equal in stupidity, and his head shrank. But there was one thing she did not expect. One thing she did not expect of a curse said so hastily. She forgot some of the old words. And she gave him an incredible amount of luck. Tiny Paul would fall from the third story of the barn. He would be okay. There would suddenly be just downstairs a loft of hay. Nothing would happen to him. He was a bit famous like this, but because of his dim-wittedness, he forgot. He forgot what he did, and the farmers thought that the witch is queer. The witch is dead. Maybe the witch is never coming back. But the blood moon is coming soon. 3 days now. And during this week, as the week, the royal family has decided to stay at the farm. One of the boys there, and a girl, the girl named Seraphim and the boy named Jonathan, decided to spend more time with Tiny Paul. So they started traveling through the village. He would show them stuff. They would make fun of him. Go on.
They started traveling through the village, They'd make fun of him. The young princess would practice her flirting skills. She would bat her eyelashes, like so.
Oh, I would like to choose to draw a card. Do you want to, for last time, do you want a card or not?
I'll take one card.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you first. One or two?
Just one.
Okay, so I'm gonna look.
Ooh. Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to actually choose one card as well, so don't look. Done. Go.
She'd practice her flirting, like batting her eyelashes. And they would get up they would get up to all sorts of shenanigans. Tiny Paul would show them the best places in the villages. He would show them like places where you could hide when you didn't want to work and take a nap in the shade. Show them all the kids that the commoner, or show them all the games that the commoner kids played, like pick up sticks and counting rocks and straight lines, stop and go, all those fun games. And he sometimes he got the names wrong, you know, but he always got the rules right. And they got into all sorts of mischief, like stealing pies off of windowsills, and for royalty they were actually sort of naughty. And this went on, I think, 1 day, 2 days, and every day the got closer to the blood moon. And unlike in previous years, there was no anxiety in the town. There was no sort of this furtive unrest. Everyone was continuing happy day after day. There were no concerns. And then the day of the blood moon came. King and Queen settled themselves into bed. Everyone in the village went quietly to sleep. And the witch creeped out of the forest. And not knowing that it was King and Queen's home, she went to the King and Queen's house. She snuck in. She stole Seraphim from her bed and fled into the forest. The next morning, the King and Queen woke up and Seraphim's gone. No one knows what happened. And the villagers are forced to explain about the witch and how they thought she was dead. But in all the hubbub, no one notices that Tiny Paul grabs up his pitchfork and marches into the forest. No one except Jonathan. Jonathan grabs his sword, which is another one of my cards,
Yeah.
and follows him into the forest. Tiny Paul's not very bright, but Jonathan's even though he's small, he's clever and quick-witted, and he realizes how ridiculously lucky Tiny Paul is. So he catches up to Tiny Paul and says, "Look, the only way this is going to work is if we stumble upon her by accident. So I'm going to tie a blindfold around your head, and I'm just going to turn you around, and you're going to walk in a random direction through the forest, and that'll be the way she is, because you were so ridiculously lucky that it could not work any other way." Jonathan, not being very bright, thinks this makes perfect sense. Sort of the two ends of the spectrum here. And he ties a blindfold around his eyes, and he starts walking off deeper and deeper into the forest, completely blindfolded. Somehow he doesn't trip over anything. Sometimes it almost seems like trees like get out of his way, so he doesn't have to.
Trees get out of his way.
Okay.
So he walks, he stumbles, but he never falls. He never falters. His head, his mind focused on Seraphim. She was a friend, but she reminded him of something. And suddenly, the the thing they used to blindfold him, the rag, felt tighter. Tighter. Would go tighter, and as he went on, as he thought about Seraphim, as he kept focus on Seraphim and only on her, the rag snapped. His head was big again. He remembered. He remembered his sister. He remembered everything. And he knew what would happen if he did not save Seraphim. But in front of him was a bigger threat, a more immediate threat. In front of him was a giant, scaly thing, guarding what seemed to be a cave. It was snoring loudly, snoring so loudly that the trees swayed forth and backwards when it would inhale and exhale. This creature was a dragon. And that is why he realizes nobody has ever stood up, or those who have stood up to her have never survived long enough to say anything about it. So he realized, what do I do now? Suddenly Jonathan stumbles out of the forest, and he looks bewildered at this dragon, and with a Tiny Pete again.
Tiny Paul.
And at Tiny Paul quickly grabs his head and puts her mouth over his head, over his mouth, so he doesn't say anything. Couple of minutes, they calm down. The dragon is still sleeping. Jonathan looks at Tiny Paul and says, I think I have something that might help us. And out of his neck he pulls out a necklace. A necklace with a tiny bottle in it. Something light, moving around. Dad gave this to us. He told us only to use it in the most dire of situations. And he took the cap off, and suddenly something came out of that little bottle. A small creature with wings, golden hair, and a tiny body. A fairy, that creature was. And the fairy smiled at Jonathan and at Tiny Pete, looked at Tiny Pete and told him, I read your heart, young one. It is pure and good, and I will help you to get past this evil creature filled with greed and pride. And so the fairy takes out a handful of pixie dust and sprays it atop of the dragon. The dragon continues to snore, and she turns around and says, You can go now. You can cut even lumber on him and he wouldn't feel it. So they sneak easily around the dragon and into the cave. The cave goes on and on and on. Maybe hours pass as they move. Tiny Pete looks around the walls, and sometimes when there is a torch lit, he recognizes a dark stain of blood. Old. Very old in there. But there is definitely blood. He knows what that is, and he knows he must do it again, and this time forever. Eventually, they go out into an opening, and this whole cave opens, this whole tunnel opens into a whole city. An abandoned, ruined city in the middle of this mountain that they were in. Nobody was seen on the street. Nobody and nothing moving. Only back in the city, very back, a dark cottage stood higher than the castle, stood more and more imposing than the towers of the cathedral. He knew that is where he would find Seraphim. Jonathan was scared, but gripping his sword in his hands tightly, he said to his friend, "Let's go. We can do this. Seraphim counts on us." And they started moving towards... by the way, I completely forgot. Do you want the card or not?
I'm happy with my cards.
They start moving towards the dark cottage of the witch. Eventually, they get through the city. They pass the cathedral. They pass the ruined castle. They pass the houses and residences that once held human lives, now ruined and desolate. And they reach the door of the cottage. Now, what would they do? Jonathan looked at Tiny Pete. Tiny Pete looked at Jonathan. They did not know what to do. Knocking would only tell her they're there. Nobody was left in the city. So how would they make this happen? Jonathan remembered what they did in the forest. And he told Tiny Pete, Tiny Paul, maybe you could try, take your pitchfork, blindfold yourselves again, and run around the cottage, and just plunge the pitchfork in wherever you feel like. Tiny Pete thinks about the last couple of months in his life, and realizes how lucky he has been. He doesn't make the connection that it was the curse of the witch, but he does think he is blessed by somebody, by a god, by the fairy that he just saw. He does not know, but there's nothing else better to do. So he takes the blindfold, puts it across his head, and starts going around the cottage. And
Does Jonathan go with him?
Jonathan joins him, yeah.
Okay.
They start moving around the cottage. Jonathan easily just staring at Tiny Paul. I have something with Pete. And at a certain point, Tiny Paul feels his heart throbbing, his full body exhilarating, and he plunges the pitchfork deep into the cottage. He hears a shriek, and then another small shriek, a thud. And suddenly, from the door opens, and there is Seraphim, the hag behind, bleeding. Tiny Paul jumps in, as well as Jonathan. They don't let her do anything.
So you would say they're meeting Seraphim again?
Yes, they are meeting Seraphim again.
Okay. I have meeting.
Go on. I will take 2 cards. 1 second. So, I'll show this. Okay, that's it.
Good.
Go on.
Alright. So they jump in. Swords. Jonathan swinging his sword kind of inexpertly, and Tiny Paul is stabbing with the pitchfork. He's just sort of treating her like a hay bale because he's not used to stabbing people. He's used to like moving hay around with a pitchfork. And there's a cauldron in the cottage, and somehow they get the idea that they should push her towards the cauldron. And so the Tiny Paul literally just stabs her with the pitchfork and sort of like picks her up and shoves her over the brim of the cauldron, and she falls in, and there's this horrible smell, and there's this green smoke that billows up from the cauldron.
Would you say she is dying now?
Yeah, as much as a magical being can die, I think she's dying.
Well, you know what? I'm actually not going to interrupt you. Go on. I want to hear. I'm going to give you this. Go on.
All right. And although Tiny Paul and Jonathan don't know this, the secret to the witch's eternal life was that she could brew a special potion, and when she put a young person in the potion, she would breathe in the smoke, and it would give her the power of luck and the power of youth and the power of beauty. And the smell reflects the person that that is used for the final ingredient of the potion. So the witch's smell is atrocious, and they rush out of the cottage before they can breathe too much of it. But they are because the witch was so old and so corrupt, they start to age instead of getting younger. And they don't even realize it in the dark of the cave. But as they get back to the as they run up the tunnels and get back to the dragon, they get their first hit of sunlight. They see that the hair has started to gone gray. They notice a weakness in their limbs. It's harder and harder for them to walk, and they feel almost bitter. Like their thoughts are clouded by bitterness and resentment. And Seraphim starts to wail, like, "Why did you even save me if this is going to be our fate? What's wrong with us? You're not proper heroes at all." And her speaking wakes the dragon. Because she was not ensorcelled with the pixie dust. And she runs off in the forest in despair, and the dragon blinks slowly, stretches his neck out, and stalks into the forest after her. And Seraphim and Jonathan want to follow her, but they were closer to the cauldron, so they got a bigger whiff, and they're starting to feel very old and weak, and the sun feels so good, and they just sort of start to lay down and start to nap at the entrance to the dragon's cave. And in the forest, Seraphim continues to run. She starts to limp. She picks up a stick from the cottage floor. And actually, it seems like a very ordinary stick. But is it? Is it? And she starts to limp along with the stick. And eventually the dragon catches up. And the trees are still being weird. Because they're almost getting out of the dragon's way. It's like the dragon has some sort of deal with the forest where he can walk through it without having to, tear it down. Or maybe it's just the magic of being a dragon. And he catches up to Seraphim, and he sniffs her, and he says to her, "You smell like the witch, but you are not the witch. Where has the witch gone? The witch and I have an agreement." Seraphim says, "The witch is dead. She fell into her cauldron." That is not acceptable. I require someone to bring me certain items. The person must be mortal-ish. I shall now have to find a replacement. Tell me, little girl, do you want to die? No. Excellent. And he reaches his nose down, like right next to her, and breathes in. And the green billowing smoke sort of oozes out of her pores and goes up the dragon's nostrils. Ah, little deaths. How repulsive. And as he does the Seraphim, her hair goes back to her beautiful blonde color from the gray, and she feels the strength returning from her limbs. And she feels a mysterious power from the stick. It's almost like it's thrumming in her hands. You okay there, Chucky?
Yeah. This is a cough that's been here for a couple of weeks now. Yawn.
And the stick suddenly almost speaks to her, but not out loud. It's like in her mind. It's like, the forest doesn't like him. He holds us here. He threatens us. We have to do as he says. There's a weakness. The dragon has a weakness. He can't stand the essence of real life. He can't stand the purity of the cycle. You just need to introduce the lifeblood of something into his body, and he will wither like the sap of a tree. Stab him with me. Stab him with me. Seraphim, with strength returning to her limbs, sort of breaks the stick in half, sees the sap oozing from it, and asks the dragon what she is required to bring him. She sort of inches closer so she can listen to him very carefully. And the dragon says, yes, indeed. I require artifacts, shall we say, objects that people have invested into pottery, inanimate things that I can consume the essence of. And in the middle of the word essence, she tries to stab him with the stick. And I'm actually gonna roll this.
Okay.
Right? Just to be totally random. And she fails to go through the scales. She fails to go through the scales. And the dragon looks down at her and says, I see the forest is acting up again. Tisk, tisk, tisk. And he turns to a tree and breathes fire on it, and the tree just explodes in fire. He says out loud to the forest, "Don't do that." And suddenly the forest goes completely quiet. Not even wind ruffling through the trees. And Seraphim feels her heart fill with despair. And she realizes that the only way she's going to get out of this is by doing as the dragon says. So she heads back to the village. And
so she heads back home?
Oh, well, she had, she heads back home. Because she's gonna take things away from the village to bring to the dragon. She's not sure how she's gonna do it yet, but she'll think about it on the way there.
She goes back home.
She goes back home.
Do you want the card or two?
No, I'm actually happy with where I am. I only have 3 left, so I'm pretty happy.
Okay. So, she goes back home. She sees her mother and her father, but she knows she can't go talk to them. She knows they would ask her where she is, where she had been. She would ask her about Tiny Paul. I got it right. That's good about Tiny Paul, about Jonathan, her bigger brother. Where were they? What happened? So she just entered the house, through the back door, and she took his father's signet ring, the one he used in so many judgments at the royal court. And she took her mother's necklace, the one that her father had given her on the anniversary of 25 years of marriage. She took them and she went back into the forest, trying to find her brother and her friend. She eventually made it through the forest. The half-broken stick would just sometimes vibrate or move just a tiny bit in her pocket whenever she would take a turn that she did not necessarily think it was the right one. So with the guidance of the half guidance of the forest, she made it back to the cave. Before the dragon was there. The dragon was doing something else. Maybe they were building with the forest, maybe burning more trees. She didn't know. She didn't care. She saw her friends down on the ground. How do I save them? How do I save them? They're dying. And she does not know how. She looks around. She finds the tiny open bottle. And she remembers. She remembers what her father told him. Use this only in the most dire of situations. So she raises it up, takes out the half stick, and concentrates it very greatly. What do I do? What do I do? Help me save them. And the forest says, the pixie is coming. She is the one that awoken us. We will help her. Tell the dragon you can only you only serve him if he saves your cohort. Cohort? Yeah. Cohort is the right word here. One of them you must choose. Even with our magic, we cannot save both. She falls on her knees, starts crying, starts screaming at the sky. Why, oh God, why did this happen to me? Her friends are still sleeping, aging even more. White beards, almost down to their chest, bony hands, and sunk-in eyes and cheeks. The dragon eventually returns, looks down at this little girl, and she says, I've brought what you wanted. Just save my friends, and I'll give them to you. You, trying to negotiate with me, girl? After you have tried to harm me? I do not think that is wise. Well, I won't help you if you don't save my friends. He looks down at you two and says, well. What would you say if I saved them? But I could only save one, I think. I've inhaled too much smoke for one day. I would not risk my life for your pitiful friends. Yes. And at that point she does not know what to say. She thinks. She knows her brother. If she saves her brother, he will never forgive her. He will never look at her again. She could not bear the feeling that he is living on the death of one of their best friends. If she saves Tiny Paul, the kingdom is in danger. The son, the firstborn son, is dead. That is not a good omen. And rivals see it as a very big weakness. She was the second-born child. The others were too little to get on the throne before their father died. So she said, Tiny Paul! I want to save Tiny Paul! And the dragon went down and started to inhale the green smokes around Tiny Paul. And Tiny Paul started to awaken. And as soon as Tiny Paul started to awaken, the dragon reared up his head. Where is he? I cannot see him anymore. What sorcery is this? The pixie dust was still there. The smoke from the witch only covered his body. Now that it was gone, he was invisible for the dragon. She threw the stick at him, and he talked to the stick. The stick told him, the pixie is coming. She's coming with all the antelopes, all the chipmunks, the wolves, the bears, the lions. Everybody's coming. Stick him with the pointy end when he turns around to face them. Stick him, or you will never escape him. And he suddenly rolls, tumbles, trees getting out of the way, and even some ancient trees moving towards the dragon. They surrounded him they made a half circle, a semicircle around him, and the dragon turned around. He rolled his head up high, and he said, "You dare threaten me. You have tried your forces against me countless times. You will not defeat me now, you pitiful animals. Pitiful wretches of nature." And as he was talking, his face starts to go white. His scales start to wither. He feels a piercing in his tail. He rolls up his tail around him and sees the stick in his tail. He starts rampaging. He starts throwing fireballs left, right, up and center, clawing at everything he can get his hands on, biting trunks of the mighty trends, killing off lions with the dozens. Eventually, he curls up and dies. The forest, half destroyed, some trees still burning. Tiny Tim with a broken arm, but Seraphim still alive. She ran into the cave as this went on. She came out, and they both looked at Jonathan. He was aging. His heartbeat was barely there. In a couple of minutes he'll die, said the pixie at at Seraphim's ear. Seraphim started crying. She fell down and started crying. The pixie said, "We can give you a couple more minutes with him if you want to. Say goodbye." She nodded her head, tried to shake off the tracks of the tears on her face. Tiny Paul, not Tiny Tim, sorry. It's tiny something is getting to me. And she throws the little pixie dust she still has on Jonathan's eyes, ears, and mouth. He opens them. His mouth opens as well, and he can hear, but that's the extent of what he can do. "Oh, my dear brother, says Seraphim. "I am so sorry. You had to save me and now I'm dying. I'm so sorry." She is crying heavily. And Jonathan, his mind still crowded with bitterness, now he didn't feel that bitterness. He felt something else. He felt something coming. Death. He knew it. He knew it would come. So the question was, how would he go out? He took his left hand, with the most strength he had left. The life is still in him. The pixie gasped. She was not expecting he could still do that. And brushed Seraphim's head, caressed her cheek with a thumb, and said, "Go back to Dad. Tell him you're okay. Tell him what happened. And keep keep Tiny Paul near you all your life. He is the most heroic man I have ever seen. And he will make the best of husbands for you, my little sister." And his eyes close. And he is dead.
Would you say they parted ways?
They parted ways.
I'll take that from parting ways.
Go on. And I would like to take an additional card.
Okay.
Okay. We have this card.
You didn't tell me the...
Sorry. Do you see it?
It's okay. I did, but...
Okay. I'll draw another one.
Okay.
Okay, and we have this ring. The blood. Not, there's not a ring. Sorry. This card. Okay, gone.
Good. Okay. So the tiny Paul picks up Jonathan's body, and there's almost an honor guard of chipmunks that head back with them to the village. And as they get back to the village, the people who are out in the fields and know what's going on sort of fall in behind them along with the chipmunks. I think they'd have an honor guard of chipmunks. It just makes sense to me. And they walk to the king and queen's house, and the king and queen rush outside as someone ran ahead and told them. And tiny Paul gently sets down the body of Jonathan, and says through his cunning and fortitude, we were able to rescue Seraphim. We killed a witch, and we slayed a dragon. Even the forest honors his bravery. Honor guard of chipmunks, who all bow to the king and queen and then scamper off before they get eaten for supper. And the queen says, "No, my son!" Falls down crying, and wraps her arms around his body. The king kneels and holds his wife. He says, I don't know what to do. It seems like the light has gone out of the world. And Seraphim cries. All who behold this event feel a deep, deep sorrow, as if the light really has gone out of the world, as if something bright and beautiful has been stolen away. And Seraphim says to her parents his last words. He said that tiny Paul was the bravest man he'd ever met. I should keep him with me always. And of course, so tiny Paul becomes a royal page in service to Seraphim, and he gets to go off to the castle. And the royal family never goes back to the village. They can't.
So you'd say now they're back in the kingdom?
Oh, I would say they're back in the kingdom.
So, back in the kingdom, Seraphim and Tiny Paul, they develop a close friendship to take her out of her depression phases. Tiny Paul would pick her up and bring her in the most amazing of places that he, as a page, could find, because he was invisible to most people that did not need him. He brought her up on the roof of the castle in a place where he could not fall off, and the view was amazing as the sun set. He brought her to a cave near a river where the fish with tiny wings would jump out and then crawl back into the water. She would smile. She would be happy at all of this. As the years passed, they continue on, causing mischief. They did not break this friendship in any way. They would spend hours and hours together. And at a certain point, he grew up. He was 16 now. He was a full-grown man. And he has spent more than 4 years of his life making Seraphim happy. So he went to the king, told him that he intended to take her hand, and he asked for his permission. The king looked at him and said, I cannot put you through any more trials than you have already been. If it hadn't been for you, she would have never smiled ever again. She would have become a ghost in a tower. Even though this might be irregular and harm our image, I cannot, with good heart, not give you her hand. He smiles and says, Go. Go, my son. Make her your wife. Make her smile. Forever. Until you meet the ground where you were birthed from. Make her smile. Which meant they would eventually become queen and king. And that is the story, because if there wasn't a story, there was nothing to be said. And that is Once Upon a Time.
That was fun.
That was very fun. That was very fun. So, I would like to ask you, what are the remaining cards you had?
I had window, stairs. There's one point where I could have done stairs, but I didn't think it would be good. And my win condition, I guess, was and prosperity is restored to the village. And I was actually going to go with Tiny Paul was so lucky because he stole the luck from the village. So when he left, the village became poor. And when he found out, he was going to have to go back. And they were going to have to be separated. So sort of mine was more of a tragic sort of ending, where no one ends up happy. But yours was good too.
That was awesome. That was a really great system. I did not think this would turn out that good. Why? Because I played this game before.
Don't tell chat that.
I played this game with some friends. It turns out very competitive. And I need to tell you, this game, like we played it right now, not competitive at all, was a very fun experience. Very fun experience. This is the greatest time I've had with this game.
Well, it's my first time playing it, so me too.
Okay, so I think that's it. We have reached our hour mark. I think that's it for Pinball Storytellers. But as always, do you want to talk about anything else, Justin?
Well, I think we should do Twitch talks to Storytellers.
Yeah,
but
we're doing after this.
There's nothing specific that I want to do. I think this is our first experiment with chaotic storytelling. There will be many more. We will find different ways of doing it. Because of the Twitch delay, it's a little hard to involve chat, but I want to find some way where we can do a chaotic story where chat gives us prompts somehow. So that's something we've been working on. And we talked about it coming up to this chat, and we just didn't find a way of doing it that worked with the delay, but we will.
Okay.
Other than that, I hope you guys will join us next week for more Pinball Storytellers. We don't have a plan yet, but we're going to figure it out here in a minute with Twitch.
Yeah, schedule-wise, I'll talk
Pinballs.
to you about schedule-wise, because there is a slight change that we need to make.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's about it. Do you want to say anything else besides that?
No, check me out on Twitch. I'm Cavalier Guest on Twitch. I mostly stream Hearthstone, especially since GVG came out. I've been doing a lot of deck experimentation. I actually stream right after this, so as soon as this is over, I will go do my stream.
So, what's going to happen now, guys, is that we are going to have the title screen for just a minute, and we're going to come back with Storytellers Talk to Twitch chat. That's us talking to you. So for those people who just jumped in and have no idea what this is, if you want to find out, stay in chat, and when we come back, we're going to answer all the questions that you guys have. And we're going to talk about what happened, we're going to talk about how we might have made it better, and go on and just talk about Pinball Storytellers. Maybe next week, what happens next week, maybe what format, and so on. So that's gonna be what Storytellers Talk to Twitch chat is gonna be about, and that's it for Pinball Storytellers this week. We are going to see you in just a couple of minutes, and if you're watching this on YouTube, hope you enjoyed it, and see you later.